We can start in the desert with the Arizona Cardinals, a team that you and I have disagreed on quite a bit. I have a lot of strong takes on the Arizona Cardinals. I watched the second half of their season late last week, condensed games, watched every game. And I've come around slightly more on the Cardinals afterwards, but I've also been reassured on a lot of things on this offense that I really don't like. But last season, 5-12. This year, win total set at 7. I think they go 5-12 again. I'm betting the under. Again, that's plus money. Are you thinking over? Do you have that much love?
For the Cardinals, the line is at 7. Is that where you have it?
Yep.
I have them right at 7-9, 8-8. If they don't go out and drop a game, I have them losing to teams like the Lions, the Dolphins. Even I think the Dolphins. That's a chance. This is a team that Tua and the new look Dolphins can come out and beat. I have them losing to good teams too. Cowboys, Seahawks, Bills, Patriots. Go down the list. So I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough sledding. I don't really. Again, I'm not running to place my money on this bet. I don't like the under personally. I don't think they're going to go 10-6. I think they're going to be slightly better than that. But at 7, you're likely going to get a push, and things are going to have to go your way if you're cashing the over 7. Because an 8-8 season is still, people view 8-8 in the NFL as like, obviously that's the definition of average, but they're like, oh, it was a failure of a season, and didn't make the playoffs, all those things. But when you're an up-and-coming team, when you only won 5 games last year, 8-8 is not – it's not the worst. It's especially when you are playing a tough schedule. It's hard to win 8 games a lot of times. So I think the Cardinals possibly do go over 7, or you end up with a push, get your money back at the end of the season. I would take the over, though, just because I do think they're better than a 6-10 team. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins, all the things we've harkened on for weeks now on these streams. I think they're going to be better than you think they're going to be for sure, but I think they're going to be better than a lot of people are expecting. Kenyon Drake probably going to be able to make some noise. I know you're not too high on him as well either. Larry Fitzgerald, old dependable. Either way, however you want to shake it, this is not a 10-6 team, but it's also not a 6-10 team. I think 8-8 is about right, so I will take the over if you want to lay the 130.
And for even money, you can go to PointsBet and get the line at 7.5 to bet the under. Obviously,
to bet the under, okay. I was going to say over 7.5 makes me a lot more nervous. I like the calming presence of a possible push with this team.
True. Okay. So the Arizona Cardinals. First off, don't think Cliff Kingsbury's a good coach. Second off, I don't think Kyler Murray's that good of a quarterback. Tape comes out on him, second-year quarterback. You see that sophomore slump. That's because there's usually film. On top of that, he has a horrendous offensive line. You mix second-year quarterback with film with a bad offensive line, you get Baker Mayfield last year. That's not rare. It happens all the time. I think it happens this year, especially with a very simple offense. While there's a lot of moving parts, this Kingsbury offense is simple. They had their terrible offensive line last year, and they adapted, right? They threw behind the line of scrimmage a ton. I can't even imagine how many more fantasy points Kyler Murray would have had last year if he threw the ball forward after watching those games. So many of those counted as rushes. And that's because this team, they want to get to the sidelines. They want to get away from this offensive line. They want to use their speed, get out to the boundary, try to get their playmakers to work. That's what's going to happen this year, and that's not DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins makes this offense that much better. He makes them better because he's one of the best receivers in football. But they don't have time to target him deep, and unless he's going to be catching these screens on the flat or in the flat, I don't think he gets used that much. So if you want to take this for fantasy purposes, I think Hopkins is drastically overrated right now. For fantasy purposes, this team, man, I don't know. They are set up in the absolute worst way to compete in this division. They run play super fast, and they have a terrible defense. So if they go 3-and-out, they're fucked because the 49ers, the Seahawks, they're just going to run the ball and milk the clock, and they're not going to get back on the field. And that's what we saw what happened even with the Rams last year. As on top of Murray had a really bad game. Like there was just no excuse for that. But these defenses also in the NFC West, they all play zone. So this means the quarterback needs to have time and they need to find the open pocket. Murray's not going to have time. So that's why we saw in that first Rams game, they just sat in the zone and they picked him off like 3 or 4 times. But I have zero confidence in this team. And yes, they're going to make changes, but not enough. And Kenyon Drake's already hurt. He's going to get hurt immediately again. It's going to be Chase Edmonds as their starting running back, who Kingsbury already called a RB1 for I don't know why. He's terrible. Thanks for the thumbs up. I'm going to assume that's validation for my extreme hate on the Cardinals here. But yeah, at 7.5, I will put as much money as I want on this. They're not good, and playing in that division makes them worse. But like you said, winning 8 games is not 8-8 doesn't mean you're a good or an average team, even though that's a 50-50 record. 8-8's a good record. I don't think they're a good team,
especially in a great division. Like, if you go 8-8 in, I don't know, the
NFC East.
Yeah, I was going to say the NFC East. If you're outside of the Patriots, probably not considered that good of a season. And the sad thing is that, most of those teams have not been able to even hit 8-8 for years and years now. But if you go 8-8 inside a division like this that just clobbers on each other, and it's hard to win in the NFC West. Like, those games are always so weird. They're hard to bet. They're hard to watch sometimes. And then other times it's amazing, beautiful football. Like the NFC West is just one of those different animals. And the Cardinals are going to have a tough time winning within their own division. I give you that. I have them losing, I believe, twice to the 49ers. I don't know if I gave them 2 losses to the Seahawks or not. It doesn't look like it. But then you got to play, the Seahawks and the Bills and the Cowboys and other good teams too. So they're going to need to pick up wins outside of their division. If they have any chance of cashing the over, that is 100% for sure. I think the Lions and Cardinals matchup might be a fun one. What do you think about that game?
Absolutely, especially after the week 1 tie last season. Let's see. I'll put some money on a tie again. Why not? Just get those odds. It could happen. Who knows? Especially with the Lions. If they're in position to tie the game, they'll do it, but they'll miss the extra point to win it.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. Sorry, I got focused on hockey there for a second. It's going to be fun to watch this team, I think, just because they are intriguing. They interest me. I'll be rooting for them so that I can say at least I was, not totally wrong about this. You can't hold it over me every single week of the season, but I think they're a little bit better than last year's record, at least, which was 5-10, which is why I have them at about 7 wins. They pulled those 5 wins out last year. I do think they're better this year. Kyler Murray might struggle more, but overall as a unit, more experience, more talent now. 5 games last year. I think they can pull 1 or 2 more out of the hat this year.
And they do get a benefit of pretty easy schedule. They play the NFC and AFC East. I mean, aside from Bills and Cowboys, the rest of them are very beatable. So we'll see how those divisions shake out.
They're another team too, as we talked about on the last stream, where you compared this year's Panthers team to last year's Cardinals team. And I think last year's Cardinals team can also be compared to this year's Cardinals team, where they are going to be competitive and they're going to be in games, but do they know how to win? Do they know what to do in the fourth quarter? Are they able to score in crunch time? Can Kyler Murray deliver those, game-winning drives, those big moment plays that are going to seal off a game for you? That's yet to be seen. As you mentioned, Kyler Murray could follow in the footsteps of Baker Mayfield. He already did so in college, winning the Heisman, getting drafted early, all that. So I don't know if he keeps following suit, then it could be a rough year for Kyler Murray. But I think there's other ways this team can find success as long as they can find a way to stop people as well. Problem is they don't have any superstars on defense. One of their best players is been around forever. Isn't Calais Campbell still on that team?
No, he's on the Ravens.
Okay, you got.
They have Chandler Jones though. Chandler Jones is
That's who I'm the DN. That's who I was. Yeah, he is very good. But they got some older guys, and just overall, no really, superstars on the team. They're like a bunch of guys, basically on that defense. So if they can figure it out, and the offense is better than you think that they will be, I think they got a shot at 7 to 8 wins, but nothing more than that. I'm not out here saying the Cardinals are going to win 10 games. Anybody that is would just be insane, I think, and that would be a huge leap. But 7, I can see.
And that's fair, and you are definitely in line with most people on the opinion of this team. We'll see what happens. Next team, Los Angeles Rams, from Super Bowl to dumpster fire, but they're over-under set at 8 this season. Again, that doesn't mean average, especially in this division. They won 9 games last year. I have them coming in under 8 wins. I have them at 7 and 9. I'll give you a little bit more reason in a little bit, but what's your initial thoughts on the Rams this year?
I have them matching last year's record. I think they didn't get significantly worse, didn't get significantly better. I think they peaked, obviously, at least this group, and Todd Gurley gone now. Had the Super Bowl run just a couple of years ago. Not the same team. Have really good wide receivers. I do like them. I like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, but 9 and 7 is pretty much my cap for me. They just aren't the team that they used to be, and I don't have much. I mean, I know that's very surface level analysis, but I don't have that much more to say about the Rams. Jared Goff, I think, is good. I think he's serviceable. I think he needs to keep taking big steps forward if the Rams want to continue long-term success. I would not say they went to the Super Bowl in spite of him, but he could have been better in a lot of situations. I think Jared Goff's a fine quarterback, and I like him as a guy and everything, but he's not the guy that's going to go out there and just tear it up all the time and win you games and get the most out of your team. Not typically, anyways. So 9 and 7, I think, is a pretty fair record for the Rams.
And Jared Goff is interesting because if he has a clean pocket, he looks like an NFL quarterback.
Yeah,
he looks good. Last season, offensive line really struggled, and I don't think they addressed it. So we'll see if they come out and struggle again. If they do, I think the running game again struggles. I think Jared Goff again struggles.
Yeah, and I think the running game and Jared Goff, it goes hand in hand. I don't know how good of a running game he had at Cal. I know that they played from a very spread offense, pretty much 5 guys out wide all the time. But then when he got to the Rams, he had Todd Gurley, but he had more time, more chances downfield, a cleaner pocket. All of these things come from a successful running game, which they had at first. And then you saw it in the Super Bowl too. Their running game wasn't really going at the level that they needed it to. Todd Gurley had sat out most of the game. Jared Goff was trying to make plays, but just couldn't. I think he's a good quarterback. I just don't think he's the guy that's going to go out and win you 3 or 4 games that you shouldn't have won, which is why I don't have them at 11 or 12 wins or something like that. I have them around 9 because I think they're good enough to win the games that they're supposed to win, and they're definitely capable of losing to good teams as well. This is not a powerhouse Rams team like we have seen in the past.
And by the way, you can
starts too sometimes, like really bad starts.
Yeah. You can get the line at 8.5 at BetMGM, FanDuel, and PointsBet. I love the under at 8.5. I think 8 and 8 would be generous for them this season. I think the league's figured out Sean McVay. I think he's a drastically overrated head coach. I think he's a good head coach. I don't think he does anything special, and I think he desperately needs a very good offensive line to do anything because he needs all that moving parts. He needs the time to let routes develop downfield, and he needs a running game to set it all up. And last year, there was no running game. There's no time to throw. Jared Goff was one of the worst quarterbacks of all time under pressure. And just watching their drills in practice where they have Jared Goff have a rusher come at him, stop, and then he pretends to throw the ball and doesn't actually throw the ball in the air right now, I don't think that helps him in the slightest. And it looks like a John Gruden drill, and I'm sure he got it from John Gruden under his tutelage there. I think the Rams are fine. I think Jared Goff's contract screws them, and I think it hinders them from getting the players they need.
I mean, they gave him a lot of money, and I don't think that he was gonna walk away. And if he did, I don't think he would have been able to garner nearly that amount from any other team. Like, the Rams gave him a lot of money, and again, Super Bowl run, he did play well, high pick, perfect storm for paying a guy, I guess. But it's you bid against yourselves. That's all you did there, and you mortgage the future. We hear that all the time. And mortgage the future to lock up your young quarterback. And when he's not a guy, which I've said a few times now, when he's not the difference-making guy, when he's not the guy to put you over the top in 2, 3, 4 games of a season, it's a hindrance. And he is a good quarterback, but he needs the team around him to be that good. He needs an offensive line. He needs all these things. And eventually, those top-notch guys are not going to be there because you don't have the money for them to be there. And now all of a sudden, this Super Bowl team with all sorts of potential, Sean McVay, the young genius, all of it, they could be going to, heading towards rebuild mode or something like that.
They need to be. Unfortunately, in a hard knocks year and a year where they get a brand new stadium, they're expected to play. Like, they can't be rebuilding, but honestly, that's what this team needs. So they're in a tough spot.
Well, especially in, you're going to run it back, obviously, this year. If they do go 8-8, try and draft well, give them the benefit of the doubt next year. But then all of a sudden, if we're talking the 2022 season, Jared Goff has now become a true veteran. He's been there for a while. You're going to know who he is to his fullest capabilities. Sean McVay might be, more exposed, if you want to say that, 2 or 3 years down the line of just, mediocrity. That's when I could see, a full overhaul. And then basically you gave up 5 to 6 years just to not make amends. I can't think of like a great phrase for it, but just to basically retroactively pay the people that got you to the Super Bowl, not thinking in the future, not thinking forward. You basically were just saying, we got to the Super Bowl. That was great. We could probably do it again, but now we've seen 2 years later, probably not going to happen again, most likely. So I don't see a rebuild coming, obviously not this year, maybe not next year, but this is a team that is all of a sudden could be at the bottom of the NFL within just a few years. Especially, too, they're not going to be able to pay Kupp. Robert Woods, I think, is a little bit older. They're probably going to let him go. He's going to get money somewhere else. I like Tyler Higbee, but, you're not going to pay a lot of money to a tight end. How much does a tight end help, a struggling team, a rebuilding team? Not all that much. Aaron Donald, huge contract. So all of a sudden, all your money are invested in one defensive guy who, again, 3 years down the line might not be the best defensive player in football anymore, and Jared Goff, who has just been a fine quarterback for most of his career. So that all is a recipe for an eventual rebuild.
And all the guaranteed money they sank into Todd Gurley and Brandon Cooks for them both to get completely destroyed by their own bodies. I mean,
yep. And no longer on the team now, still paying those guys, I'm sure, or they had to pay, to take some hit against the salary cap.
Big hit. Yeah, not a good time to be a Rams fan, in my opinion. I was very vocal in that I thought McVay should have opted out of his contract and went and taken that Washington job, go back to Washington, but they signed Rivera pretty quickly, so that was okay. We spent a lot of time on that first team. Let's head to Seattle. Seattle Seahawks. Over under set at 9.5 wins. last season, in a year that everyone thought was a down year for the Seattle Seahawks, they ended up winning 11 games. I think the 9.5 line's insulting to them. I have the over pretty confidently. What about you?
Same. It's the first time in these last two streams where I pretty much just love a bet, like a no-brainer for me. 9.5. I think if all goes wrong, they're a 10-6 team. I think they're better than that, though. 11-5 pretty confidently in my mind. I doubt you can find it, but if you could get a line of 9, I mean, I'd throw everything I got at that. Probably not out there, but still, the over 9.5 is a dog, too. You're getting paid plus 110 to take the over 9.5. The Seahawks are a team, they just win games. Russell Wilson wins games. Whether they're low scoring and ugly or they're, out of it going into the fourth quarter, they win games, and they always have a good record. There's no reason that they won't this year. I think the Rams and the Cardinals are both beatable, potentially 2 times if you bring your A game each time. And then again, as you mentioned when we were talking about the Cardinals, they're playing the NFC East, correct? And then the AFC, I forget you said AFC. It was not a good conference.
AFC East.
AFC East. Okay, so both Easts. A lot of winnable games, especially for a guy like Russell Wilson. I've got them losing to the 49ers once, losing to potentially the Cowboys or Falcons. Falcons are just a team too that the Seahawks kind of just always struggle with a team like that. A team that, especially in years that they're playing good, like the Falcons last year, were not playing that well, and the Seahawks typically lose to teams that are just not. They shouldn't come out there and beat them, and the Seahawks find a way to lose to them. So I think that Falcons game going to be interesting. Falcons should take that one. I think the Seahawks and Patriots going to be a fun matchup. Giving that one to the Patriots, and then the Cowboys too. I think the Cowboys figure out a way to beat the Seahawks this year, but not all that many losses. And again, obviously, all the potential in the world to beat either the Patriots or the Falcons. So if they take one of those games, all of a sudden, again, we're in the 12-4 range. You're getting that line at 9.5. A lot of cushion there.
And I will say, you just talked about those 2 games. Schedule is very much in favor of the Seahawks for those 2 games. First week, they go to Atlanta. I would assume relatively empty stadium. So it's not the same Atlanta home game as we would be used to. And then week 2, they're home prime time. So prime time at home, Russell Wilson, unstoppable. Again, probably not the same venue as it normally would be. But Russell Wilson in prime time is still dangerous. I know it's the Patriots, but I feel pretty good about it. For Russell Wilson, I think one time in his entire career, he won single-digit games. That was 9 games. Every other year, he's won double-digit. I have zero reason to believe they won't again this year. If you read the tea leaves, they want to open up this offense. They want him to throw the ball. It's not going to be the same Seattle offense as we are used to. They're going to run it quite a bit. But they bring in Greg Olsen. They bring in Philip Dorsett. Both Philip Dorsett and Russell Wilson are pushing very hard to get Antonio Brown right now. So I would assume they bring in either Antonio Brown or Josh Gordon again.
And so that would be fun to watch. And it would be, I think, a huge benefit for a guy like DK Metcalf, who just pretty much runs straight lines and tries to out-jump people. If you can get another defender off of him, worried about another number 1 option guy, especially a guy like Antonio Brown, I think that rises DK Metcalf's stock exponentially, especially in a fantasy situation as well, but especially just in talking terms of success on the field in regular real life football. I think DK Metcalf should be begging and pleading with Coach Carroll to bring one of those guys in. They have their own sets of issues, different kinds of issues and stuff, but like we've seen Antonio Brown play entire seasons. We've seen him completely dominate the entire league. Josh Gordon does it in such small spurts, and he comes and goes. He's like a ghost, It's like, oh, Josh Gordon was here. Like, now he's gone again. Like, I just think if you have your choice between those two, I'm taking Antonio Brown. But either way, if you get a number 1 option, a big body, talented receiver like that, a guy with those kind of hands, you can just send DK Metcalf straight down the field, and he's going to have one guy to beat every time.
Well, that and Tyler Lockett becomes your 3rd wide receiver.
which is crazy. I mean, he
Yeah.
once was Tyler Lockett, once was back with, Doug Baldwin and Curse, and then obviously has stepped up and been that number one guy for the last few seasons. But if you can have Tyler Lockett as your number 3 option, you're sitting pretty.
Yeah. And then with, Greg Olsen, Will Dissly at tight end, you have Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson at running back. Offense is scary. Defensively, they just traded for Jamal Adams, difference maker, especially in the running game in the NFC West. That's huge. I would be surprised if Jadeveon Clowney does not sign back with Seattle, especially, he's getting a 1-year deal now, and I would assume Seattle is the only team that would offer him somewhat a decent amount of money right now just because he knows the defense, they know what they're getting. He turned down a huge deal with Cleveland, but and he's not going to get the same level of money, but I would assume they bring him in. So if they bring in Clowney and Antonio Brown, this Seahawks team is going to be scary. I think they got to be up there for favorites in the NFC at that point. I don't know how they wouldn't be.
Right. And again, just to reiterate, you're getting this line at 9.5 as a dog.
Yes.
Like, I don't understand this at all. I think the odds makers might have been having a little bit too much fun with the, newly legalized product in Las Vegas while they were making this, because it makes no sense to me. I wasn't even thinking about the defense when I was going through this until you said that. Obviously, Jamal Adams is huge. But, yeah, if you bring back Clowney, just the reputation of this defense. And I also think they got to be in the running for best personalities out of any team, wouldn't you think? You get Jadeveon Clowney, Jamal Adams. Like him or hate him, Russell Wilson has a very polarizing personality. Pete Carroll. You just go down the list. Like, it's just going to be
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown, yeah. How did I forget him? Exactly. Like,
yeah.
So you bring those guys in, and you just start talking about talk about a football team that you want to keep your eye on. Like post game interviews, especially if they have success and they loosen up a little bit. Coach Carroll's one of those guys, anyways. If things are going well for him, he doesn't care. You can do whatever you want. He's going to have fun. He's like a little bit outlandish. So I think this Seahawks team, is going to be really good on the field and really entertaining off the field.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's move on to the NFC champions from last season, the San Francisco 49ers. They went 13-3. The line is currently at 10.5. For me, this is one of the most difficult ones to pick in the entire NFL. I currently have them at 11 wins and do not feel good about it. So I have them with the over. Obviously, the wide receiver core is a huge question mark because of injuries. Offensive line, running backs, quarterback, tight end, that's all good. Defense, I think they may take a tiny step back, but they're still good. It all comes down to that passing game. And if they can stay healthy, get healthy, if they bring somebody else in, again, that was one of the very first rumored spots for Antonio Brown. Never know if that happens again. It's definitely an ideal place to play. Great park, great team. A lot of people are going to want to go there. That's definitely a Sanu destination. Especially Shanahan's already had experience with him in Atlanta. If they get Sanu, I just thought about that. That's probably a top landing spot too. But yeah, so what's your initial thoughts on this 10.5 line for San Francisco?
Yeah, we have the exact same thoughts here. I also have them at 11-5. But I could see them, dropping a game that they're not supposed to, struggling a little bit in certain situations. Huge year for Jimmy G. Like, he's got to be good this year. We saw him not play his best game in the Super Bowl, kind of overthrow some guys, miss some guys, really make people be like, hey, remember why we were asking questions about Jimmy G? Like, we kind of stopped because this team was so good this year, but maybe we should start asking those questions again. Obviously, another guy who signed a huge contract, a Jared Goff-like contract, and you just don't want to be end up being in the same position as the Rams. If you're this 49ers team, you think you're on top of the world. You made the Super Bowl. All looks good. Young head coach. brilliant head coach. I'll give you that. But much of the same situation as the Rams just a few years ago. So if they're not careful, they could potentially be heading down. I don't think as drastically, but maybe heading down the same path in the next year or two, where they're just not as good as they should be, or not as good as they were, even though they should be getting better. They should be taking a step forward, but sometimes they just don't. Sometimes players have better years than other years, and again, it's going to be up to Jimmy G, and he's got obviously Kittle there. That's a huge advantage. I don't think that you're ever going to have to worry about Kittle, no matter who or when you're talking, who he's playing for, what year you're talking about. Kittle is just a monster. But other than that, I mean, I could see them potentially just coming out, laying an egg, struggling 1 or 2 weeks, and then that 10.5 line, doesn't hit by 1 or 2 games. Like, I'm just thinking, I don't think they're a 9-7 team, but I could see 10-6 all day. I could see them as a 10-6 team, just good enough to make that extra spot in the playoffs, maybe. Probably not a team you're going to want to see when we get to the playoffs. Obviously, that's a ways down the road, but could see some potential offensive struggles just because things should be clicking on all cylinders. They should be better, just as good or better than last year. A 13-3 season, you come out and expect to win just about the same amount of games. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. 10-5 though does make me slightly nervous. Taking the over plus 102, but again, like if you're going to bet inside this division, why are you looking at this line instead of the Seahawks? This line is way more questionable, less of a payout. They got to win an extra game, so I would personally be fading the 49ers in this situation, and take that money you would throw on the 49ers, throw that on the Seahawks as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Definitely a situation I'm going to avoid if I can. The only thing is, and I do agree, this offense definitely isn't top-notch. It could struggle. The counter argument would be who they're playing. So aside from the tough divisional opponents, again, AFC and NFC East, a lot of horrendous defenses Garoppolo's not going to have to throw. Then outside of the AFC and NFC East opponents, they play the Packers. I don't think Garoppolo's going to have to throw. So, I mean, schedule's in their favor.
Packers too. I think the Packers lose to them in the regular season and then maybe get a shot at them in the playoffs, and they finally get their retribution in the playoffs. That's how it would work out, perfectly in my mind. But I think the 49ers do take that regular season game again this year.
And of course, it's a short week. So perfect for Green Bay. Yeah. We have news on the Leonard Fournette contract. He signed for a 1 year max of $3.5 million. So the incentives would equal up to 3.5. I would assume that means the contract's around 1.5 to 2. So minimum with incentives. Not a surprise in the slightest.
Right. And that's the perfect situation for him. You're still making, at least probably $1.5 million, $2 million to play football in a great situation and a good offense. Possibly win or at least get some playoff experience. Like the Jaguars had that one run to the AFC Championship, but that was it. So even if you don't make the Super Bowl, if you can play a wild card game or a division game or whatever, put up some stats, get that experience under your belt, that's all going to help you moving forward. So pretty good situation, great landing spot for Leonard Fournette.
And I'm going to make this known to the public now, what I want to do in next offseason. I want to make sure we get an interview with Leonard Fournette, and I want to ask the question to have him compare Tom Brady and Blake Bortles. What's it like playing with those two? Because I'm a big Blake Bortles guy. I love him.
Goats.
He's the absolute best. I've asked many NFL players about Blake Bortles. I had one of his former linemen come on and talk about Blake Bortles. And that's kind of my goal for every interview I ever do, I think, is to make sure his name lives on forever.
And, there was one point in his career where it was kind of a joke, or like when he did have that run, it was like, oh, Blake Bortles, whatever. But he is nobody has a bad thing to say about him around the league. He's beloved by the Rams. He was liked a lot by Jacksonville. I just think, I think they had to part ways. I realistically couldn't see them still with Blake Bortles, and you would have had to pay him, and you'd still be in this situation that you're in, but paying a quarterback and stuff. So he had to move on from Jacksonville, but people liked him there. People like him out in LA. Jared Goff has great things to say about him. And I think he's a guy, too, that eventually could find another year or two as a starting role at some point, in a starting role at some point in his career. We saw it with, what's his name? Mike Glennon. We saw him get that opportunity with the Bears. Obviously, he didn't make too much of it. He only lasted a few starts. But, I mean, that's a guy probably most everybody had written off. And, no way he's going to be a starter again. And he goes and finds himself a starting opportunity. So, Blake Bortles obviously was drafted when he was a little bit older, but has a great reputation and potentially could be a starter again in this league.
I did a live radio show in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and we were ranking best quarterbacks in the NFL. And by the end of the hour-long show, I had everyone in agreement that Blake Bortles at the time was the best quarterback in the AFC, and I will stand by that. Let's move on to the final team in the NFC West, the most recent team to let Blake Bortles go. Look at that segue. The Los Angeles Rams. We just talked about the Rams.
Yeah,
Are we done?
Yeah, I think you forgot we talked about the Cardinals at first.
Oh, yeah. Okay, look at this. I was flipping between different lists.
Yeah,
San Francisco third.
Seahawks, Niners.
I just wanted another excuse to talk about Blake Bortles, I guess. Okay, so that's it. What's your favorite over and under for this division, just for the fun of it?
For the West?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as betting, it's the Seahawks. Obviously, that's besides for the Giants under. I think they're tied for my two favorite bets that we've discussed so far. Hopefully, going to be making a few months' rent off of these bets. But the most intriguing one to me outside of that is probably the 49ers as well, just because 10-5 is such a difficult line. 10-6 it happens so easy. 11-5 is doable, but it's tough. 10-6 seems like the most likely record, and Vegas is getting us with this one at 10-5. Just going to be fun to watch that line. Going to sweat it out all season, I'm sure, whether you bet this one way or another. The other two don't really interest me all too much, just because, as we talked about, the Rams, I kind of have them right at their line. The Cardinals could go one way or the other, but I don't like laying the juice at 130. So I would say my favorite over-under is the Seahawks. The Seahawks here.
Agreed. And 49ers right now, best odds on the over for them is PointsBet. They have them at plus 115. Across all books, it's most of the books, it's either even money or plus money. It is definitely a candidate to move down to 10 even before the season starts, depending on where the sharps come in. It kind of depends on if they make any noise over the next week with a signing. But if that moves down to 10, like you talked about, I'd be very okay with that over. Just, even though I said last time we went live that I don't like to have that push.
You coming around a little bit?
With a bet that I don't feel good about anyway. If I was oh yeah, now I want this over, I feel really good about it, and it pushes, then I feel like it's a loss. If it's one that I'm like, I'll put money on it, it could happen, it has good odds, and it's a push, then.
Like I said, the push is a very calming presence in that type of situation. It's just an extra chance to not lose your money. That's all it is. But so far, just to reiterate, again, go back, watch all the streams that we've done so far here on Sportscaster. Share them if you would. We appreciate it. And I'm sure your gambling friends would appreciate it as well. But so far, we've talked about the entire NFC. If you're going to take anything from these streams, Giants under 6, Seahawks over 9.5. Those are two locks. Those are two bets I 100% am going to have money on. Actually going to be going up to my cabin this weekend, and for some reason, I just dawned on me recently that I can use DraftKings up in Michigan, and my cabin's only about 3 miles from the border. So I will be driving into the UP, sitting in a parking lot somewhere, and putting a few $100s on these bets. So, I suggest you do the same.
I couldn't agree more. Next time we'll be back with the AFC. We'll get through those this week, I'm sure. Definitely give this stream a follow. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. And we will see you next time with more money-making bets.